The SEC has gone 2 years without winning the national championship. But before that, I don't know how many national championships in a row it was, but it was 19, 20, 21, 22, 4 national titles in a row. And without Clemson and Florida State and Ohio State interrupting them for a combined 4 years in between 2006 to 2022, they won just so many national championships in a row, so many in such a short span. I still believe that this is the best conference in college football. I question whether or not the teams at the top of the SEC are the best teams at the top. I think the Big Ten may have better teams towards the top, but the SEC's depth is unparalleled, and it's not contested. It's just a non-negotiable. I think Mississippi State, Kentucky, Arkansas, some of these programs that have been down recently care more about football than your Purdue's, Northwestern's, UCLA's, etc. But I'm going to spend 60 seconds around there talking about these SEC teams. We'll start from who I think is going to be the worst team in 2025 to the best team in 2025. Make sure to tell me down below who you think the best SEC team will be in terms of power rankings. So maybe not necessarily finish, but who will be the best quality team in the SEC for 2025. Comment your thoughts down below, and make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and also, most importantly, hit that notification bell. You will not want to miss any future college football content we do here on College Football with Sam. And check the video description for a link to the Discord server, or if you want to donate to the channel, you can sign up on my Patreon page, with YouTube memberships coming soon. We will start off with Mississippi State, who I think is going to be the worst team yet again in the SEC. I do think they will improve, but I question Jeff Lebby as a head coach. I question their roster building strategy, and I don't know how much patience, how long of a leash he will be given. I mean, they finished 2-10 in the SEC, 0-8. They were 16th. They got blown out by Toledo. Teams did not take them seriously in the SEC, which in my mind was the only reason why they played anyone competitively. I watched their game against Texas A&M the other day because I'm a college football nerd, I guess. And it was so fascinating at how it seemed A&M was effortlessly leading them, effortlessly scoring on them. And it was year one under Elko, inheriting a poorly developed roster from Jimbo Fisher, and Mississippi State was playing their hearts out, and it wasn't enough. They're very limited. In this video, I'm also going to give a sneak peek of how many all-SEC players I have. My all-conference teams, all-American teams are much larger than others because I like to highlight more players. I have a total of 6 teams. 2 are honorable mention, 4 I classify as all-conference teams. I only have 2 Mississippi State players, and 4 of them, including the honorable mentions. Only 2 on the top 4 teams and 4 on the top 6 teams. I do not think they're very talented, and they're riding a lot on the transfer portal. So I'm not optimistic about Mississippi State. Up next, we have Kentucky at 15th. I was genuinely surprised that Kentucky went 4-8 and 1-7 in conference. In hindsight, I'm surprised they beat Ole Miss, let alone competed with them. They were 15th in the SEC, missed a bowl game for the first time since 2020 under Mark Stoops, and if not for a massive buyout, I think Stoops would be and should be on the hot seat. Kentucky no longer expects to go 6-6 every year. I mean, they expect to win 7, 8 games, maybe 9, depending on how old and experienced and deep the roster is, combined with whether or not they have an advantageous schedule. They don't this year. We're not here to talk about schedules, though, just team quality. I only have 4 all-SEC players for Kentucky, and those are in the top 4 teams. That's spread amongst a lot of teams, and 10 for the top 6 teams. So this team does have some depth. I think they're much better than Mississippi State, for example, but that's a low bar to cross when Mississippi State's much closer to Purdue or a MAC team than anyone else in the SEC. I'm curious to see how Zach Calzada does, and I think that their offensive line with Joshua Braun and Alex Wolschlager are some areas of strength, the offensive line is, along with maybe some defensive players. But it's going to be a long road up from where they were last season. We now move on to Arkansas, a team that is just in such dire straits given their passion and history, where Josh Pate, the first thing he said when talking about Sam Pittman being on the hot seat was, I don't know. And it felt like he got stabbed when he said that. Like, I don't know. Like a powerful start, long drawn out finish. I think that's how you sound when you're stabbed. I think that's what Christopher Lee said in an interview talking about how a man reacts when he's stabbed, or how anyone reacts when stabbed. Arkansas was lifeless last year for large parts. They went 7-6 because Talon Green's a good quarterback and Petrino's a good play caller. But 3-5 in the SEC, 11th. They beat a bad Texas Tech team in the Liberty Bowl. I'm not high on them at all this year. In total, 3 All-SEC players for me. 7 in the 6th and 5th teams included with the top 4. I think that Talon Green is probably their best overall player at quarterback along with Cameron Ball, and they lost a lot in the portal and aren't bringing in adequate talent to replace those losses. At 13th, I have Vanderbilt. What a come up for Vanderbilt. I mean, seriously, they bring back over 70% of their production, 7-6, 3-5 in conference, and they played almost everyone competitively. 12th in the SEC and beat Georgia Tech handily in the Birmingham Bowl. Tech made it look closer than the final score indicated with some late scores. I love Diego Pavia. I think his upside's limited, but he's gutsy, he's smart, he's experienced, can help him win. I think that Jordan White was a huge addition in the portal, so I believe Vanderbilt massively upgraded their roster. They're going to be much better in power ratings, and I think consequently power rankings are just non-computerized. I would feel guilty to say these are power ratings because we're human. We all have our biases. I try to be as objective as possible and think I am pretty objective, but I'm not a computer system or algorithm. So that's why I call these power rankings. Vanderbilt will definitely be improved in power ratings, though, with how much they bring back. Stowers might be the best tight end in the nation, and Miles Capers at D-end and Brian Longwell at linebacker are some players that I like, and they have a good kicker in Brock Taylor. They could contend for winning some more games this year and maybe earning a few upsets, but it's going to be hard with their talent limitations. That's why I don't have them higher than 13th, even though they'll be one of the most experienced teams in the SEC. And finally, they're not the worst in the SEC. So that's a good thing for Vanderbilt and Clark Lee. I think from here, you approach a cliff and you rapidly accelerate up, and then you plateau. And from here on out, there's going to be a lot of teams bunched together. South Carolina at 12th is probably much lower than most have them. And I can see with Lenora Sellers, and if their portal additions pan out, combined with returning a guy like Dylan Stewart and bringing back DQ Smith, that they could be much better. But their offensive line wasn't all that great last year, and they lose a lot of production there. Their D-line and defense was the strong point, and they lose a ton. They lose their starting linebackers, all of them, all of their starting defensive tackles. I don't think they adequately replaced those, like Tonka Hemingway, for example, in the portal, or TJ Sanders. Dylan Stewart and Brian Thomas Jr. could be the best DN duo in college football, but you need more than just an elite DN duo. I love DQ Smith, Jalen Kilgore, Brandon Sissy, and Judge Collier. They should have a great DB room. And then Nick Harbor could be a breakout player with that freakish athleticism at wide receiver. Imagine if he played D-end at South Carolina. That'd be the best three-headed monster at D-end in college football. It might even be a generational one. And I think Sellers will be awesome. But there's just enough missing pieces to where I'm hesitant at putting them higher than teams in front of them. Very high ceiling with an elite, potentially elite QB. I'd say for now just good or great. But they could also have a very low floor, so I'm factoring that in as well. You look at Auburn. Auburn went 5-7 last year. In case you're upset with me that I didn't mention South Carolina's record, 9-4, had an amazing season, and I only have 7 All-SEC players on there, 10 in terms of depth, including the 5th and 6th team. For Vandy, that's 6th all SEC players, 13th all SEC depth. Auburn, I'm not going to talk much about other than a few seconds because it's do or die for Hugh Freeze. They've recruited well, but Freeze hasn't earned any signature upsets or big wins like he did at Ole Miss, where he was a demon against the top 10, but occasionally slipped up. It's only been slip-ups here. I don't believe in Jackson Arnold. I believe in Auburn's offensive line and defense. I think Caleb Wheatland, linebacker from Maryland, was a big addition in the portal, and I believe that Malik Blockton, Robert Woodyard Jr., Caleb Harris, Jay Crawford, all these players all on defense are going to have a huge year. And then Xavion Miller, Jeremiah Wright, Xavier Chaplin, and then the star center Connor Liu should make an awesome offensive line. And then we can't forget about Eric Singleton Jr., Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons. I love their wide receiver room. But at the end of the day, I don't love Jackson Arnold at quarterback. I don't. And their schedule is tough. It's front-loaded. So if this team doesn't come out hot, they're going to suffer a ton of losses, and I think that'll take some air out of the tires. We have Tennessee at 10th. Tennessee was originally higher than this before, Nico left because he wanted a raise when he didn't deserve it. They went 10-3 last year, appeared in the college football playoff, and almost played in the SEC championship game. If they just beat Arkansas or Georgia, just one of those, they would have played against Texas for the SEC championship game. Tennessee has 10 all-SEC players, and including the honorable mentions, the 5th and 6th teams, as I'll repeat again because my teams are probably confusing to most people, I have 19 overall players. Definitely more talented in my mind than Auburn, South Carolina, or anyone below them. Auburn had 9 all-SEC players, 15 once you included the honorable mention teams. I have a lot of questions at quarterback. I have some questions at defense because of how much they lose, but this could be the best cornerback room in America with Jermond McCoy and Ricky Gibson III coming back, and then Boo Carter returns and Colton Hood transfers in from Colorado. And that, against a conference with a lot of newer or young quarterbacks, is going to give them some advantages. They also have a good linebacker in Jeremiah Tillander, and I think Joshua Josephs is going to be their next great defensive end. Another question for them is with how much they lose on the O-line and at wide receiver, can they reload there? There's a good chance this team wins 9 or 10 games again, but there's also a really good chance they could go 6-6 or have a losing record with how many questions they have and how low their returning production is. At 9th, we have the Ole Miss Rebels. This is a team that could improve on last year's win total or go 5-7. And that's with a schedule that's probably easier than Tennessee's. This team probably has the widest variation of outcomes in the entire conference. Maybe only surpassed by Alabama. But follow me. Kiffin goes 10-3, 5-3. They're 4th in the SEC. They crush Georgia. They handily beat Oklahoma. They put up 70, 60, and 50 burgers in their non-conference games, and they lose to LSU in overtime. Not that bad. It's hard to win in Death Valley at night, although Alabama just won by 30 last year. But point withstanding, they lose to Kentucky, and they lose to Florida. I have no idea what to think of Lane Kiffin. The only positive in my mind is Austin Simmons, who I actually have as a first-team All-SEC QB. I have 2 first-team All-SEC QBs, so that also explains why my teams are much larger. I'll explain it in a different video, talking about the All-Americans and All-Conference teams that I have. But I have Austin Simmons and Arch Manning as the 2 best quarterbacks in the SEC. Kind of a bold prediction from me. And they have awesome wide receivers in DeJon Stribling, Caden Lee, Daquan Wright, and Luke Hasz. I think will make great tight ends. They lose so much on defense, and I don't think they did a great job replacing there. And I still have questions about whether or not they can run the football. So 10 All-SEC players, 17 when you include the honorable mention teams. I expect this team to take a huge step back in power ratings, but with an easy schedule, they could improve on their win total or match it from last year. At 8th, we're finally cracking the top half, ladies and gentlemen. We have the LSU Tigers. A lot of people, so many people think that LSU is this top 2 SEC team. And I'm going to rant for 50 seconds here. I don't get it. I don't get it. Garrett Nussmeier could be a great NFL QB, but in watching so many of his games, turnover. There are more turnovers that he commits than plays that make me genuinely think, wow. That's not good when you're losing elite offensive tackles, when you're relying on the transfer portal that much to improve, and your best overall position coach in Bo Davis is gone. I don't like it. I think that LSU will be a good team. I think they'll be a top 25 team. I think they will probably be around the same or a little bit better than last year, which, given how much they lost at positions that carried them last year, I think is impressive. But I'm sorry, losing to Alabama by that much, losing in the fashion they did to A&M, to Florida, losing to a USC team who couldn't win a close game to save their life, I question Brian Kelly's coaching. I question his approach. And they have not recruited at the level that they did under Ed Orgeron, even, at least by the rankings. So I'm just saying, this is a big year for Kelly, and I don't see it. I have him tabbed with 13 All-SEC players, 17th when you include the depth. They are nowhere near Alabama, Georgia, Texas, or in my mind even A&M, roster-wise. They're just not. This is the one trend I'm bucking. I'm not buying LSU. Almost everyone else is. I am not buying them. Because if they just go 9-3, they're probably missing the playoffs. If they go 8-4, well, Kelly might be fired at the end of the year. Just saying. Number 7, we have Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a total wild card. They could have a losing record, or they could win 8 or 9 games. They don't quite have the ceiling of a lot of other teams because their schedule's tough. And you saw that wear on them last year. They played in a bunch of close games. They got blown out by Texas. They got humiliated pretty handily by Tennessee. Oklahoma made that game look a little bit closer at the end than it was. I'm higher on them than, let's say, LSU or some other teams like Tennessee or Ole Miss, because I think they have a lot of quality players in the SEC. 13 All-SEC guys, 19 if you include the honorable mentions. Looking at their defense, you have Dominic Williams, Jaden Jackson, Grayson Halton, and David Stone. I have 4 D tackles on my All-SEC teams from Oklahoma. And Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie, Jaron Kanak, Sammy Omosigho. I hope that's how you say his name. 4 linebackers. And then I think Robert Spears-Jennings and Eli Bowen will be first-teamers at safety and corner. This defense is going to be impressive. I think that with Mateer and Ott, they'll at least be able to better manage the offensive line, and I think their O-line will also be better than it was last year. This team should improve everywhere on offense because it was Iowa-level bad last year in the metrics, and defensively they should still be great. So I'm optimistic about Oklahoma's chances to at least help Venables secure his job in 2025. You look at Florida. Now, Florida's a team that I want to sell as much as LSU. I think that Kelly is a way better coach than Billy Napier. I actually think that LSU is a much better staff than Florida. But I think that Kelly's approach to roster building has not panned out. And I think that because Florida just hasn't had the recent success over the past decade that LSU has, their expectations have been just a bit low enough to where showing any amount of hope gets you total buy-in. That plus DJ Lagway, who I think is an infinitely better quarterback, or at least will be compared to Garrett Nussmeier, is why I have them at 6th. They went 8-5, 4-4, and how people reacted to them would make you think they won 10 games. They didn't, and I don't think they will this year, but they do have a lot of upside to them and a ton of experience, and Napier gets his guys to play for him. That matters. It matters to get like Caleb Banks, Tyreek Sapp, great defensive linemen, to have Bryce Thornton, Sharif Denson, Devin Moore, good DBs, to have them buy in. And then to have DJ Lagway bought in. Lagway could win more games at many other programs. He could probably be better developed at other programs, at least from what I think right now. But he's bought in. Jaden Baugh is bought in. Jake Slaughter, potentially college football's best center, is brought in. I have Florida with 20 all-SEC players when you look at the 5th and 6th teams along with the top 4 teams, and 10 players in the top 4. This is a talented roster, an experienced roster, lots of upside. There's also a lot of a floor too, but with Lagway, especially if he's healthy, I think they can be a really good team this year. Certainly a top 20 team in all of football. We have Missouri at 5th. Perhaps this is a surprise to people, but I am high on Missouri. I've been high on them ever since they had that 11-win season in 2023. I think Drinkwitz is a good coach, and I think that he has the appropriate buy-in needed from Missouri to succeed. I think they made really good additions, really sneaky good additions in the portal, whether it's on the offensive line, whether it's on defense. They won all their close games last year, so I don't think they're going to get much better record-wise, but in power ratings, they're going to go up. So that tells me that making power rankings in my mind, again, can't do ratings because I'm not a computerized, consistent algorithm. I'm my own person with a brain. I'll have inconsistencies. I think that Missouri will be a better quality team than they were in 2024. Ahmad Hardy, love him. I think Bo Pribula's underrated. They returned Connor Tolleson, who was one of the best centers in America last year. Kevin Coleman, wonderful addition from the portal. And then on defense, Zion Young and Damon Wilson, that's a wonderful defensive end duo. And then I think Josiah Trotter was an underrated pickup at linebacker from West Virginia. This team is going to find ways to win. They're going to punch above their weight class. They're going to do what Drinkwitz has done the minute since he got to Missouri. So I love them. I think they're a top 20 team in all of football. Could they be contenders for the college football playoff? Yes. Could they also lose more than 3 games because of the law of close games and regressing to the mean? Yes. This is also a team that, due to what I think is a limited ceiling, I wouldn't be surprised if in a month or so when I redo these power rankings, they're much lower. At 4th, this is the point where you hit another cliff, and now you got to climb it, and then you hit another plateau. I have the Texas A&M Aggies. They return over 70% of their production. They finished 8-5, 5-3, and they have a top 10 talent roster in all of football. Now I know they didn't finish the year well. They started out 8-2, and went 0-3 in their final 3 games against Auburn, losing record, Texas, college football playoff semifinalist, and then USC, who almost had a losing record. Not exactly all that great. But I love Elko as a coach. And I have Texas A&M for now. That this could change as I do more research. I've researched the rosters the best I can, but the staffs for all conferences, I still have to finish those. Right now I have A&M tabbed with the 3rd best staff in the SEC. It's actually better than Alabama's, who, hint, hint, is ahead of them. You'll have to figure out where. But I love their coordinators, their assistant coaches. I think Elko does more with less, and with how much talent he has, with the jump that good coaches typically make from year 1 to year 2, I expect this team to be a college football playoff contender. It all depends, their ceiling does, on Marcel Reed, and I think he'll be good. Great or elite, I don't know. If that's the case, they'll certainly be national championship contenders. But I love their running back duo with Moss and Daniels. I think Armaj Reed-Adams could be the best guard in the nation, and Trezon III and Demetrius Crownover are the best tackle duo in the SEC in my mind. Kevin Conception was a big get at wide receiver, and Albert Regis, Tyler Onyedim, Cassius Howell. That makes up, once again, a great defensive front along with linebackers Scooby Williams, Tareen York, and they return Will Lee III, who had that pick 6 against Texas, their only touchdown in that game. They have a lot of veteran players. The continuity is going to get better. I'm very high on A&M. Under Jimbo Fisher, it was always a question of if they could break through. I think under Elko, it's a question of when they will break through. Now we kind of hit another climb, but not too much. I think Alabama is, and it should say Alabama there, not Georgia. But to be fair, Georgia almost also went 9-4 and 5-3. I mean, these teams were pretty similar last year. Alabama got the head-to-head win, of course, but then imploded as the season went on, I think because Georgia had a much better staff than Alabama did, and also had developed and built their roster better under the prior years of Kirby Smart than the final few years of Nick Saban. Regardless, I have Alabama ahead of A&M because I think their roster is a little bit better. A&M's staff is a little bit better as well, but Alabama, with how much talent they have and the fact that I think Kalen DeBoer is a top 5 head coach, makes it so that I think their ceiling is higher. When I look at Alabama, I have them pegged with well over 20 players on my All-SEC team. 22, counting the 5th and 6th teams, 19 overall. A&M, by the way, had 17, and then 21 overall, including the honorable mentions. So in terms of depth, a lot of these teams outside of the top 2, and you know who they are pretty similar, but the quality of starters, I think, goes up dramatically when you look at A&M and Alabama. Alabama's question is, can the offensive line gel? They have NFL talent there, but they've never been elite ever since 2020. I like Jam Miller at running back. I do not like Ty Simpson at quarterback. If I did, I'd probably have them at second or maybe even first. But the fact that he didn't start over Jalen Milroe, and even as Jalen Milroe imploded, they never pulled the plug on him, I think tells me something about the state of him. The fact that he right now is the front runner and not a newer quarterback or a younger one like Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, the true freshman, for whatever reason, and maybe I'm wrong, that gives me some concerns. Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and then Isaiah Horton. That's a 3-headed monster at wide receiver, though. And I don't have enough time to do this, but their defense is awesome. Just think about how Deontay Lawson and Tim Keenan the third come back, and then all the other players that return too. We have Georgia at number 2. The Bulldogs, 11-3 last year, 6-2, second in the SEC, lost in the quarterfinals to Notre Dame. This was Kirby Smart's worst team since 2016, his first year. Now, I have questions about Gunnar Stockton. In fact, I don't have him as a top 4 SEC quarterback. Don't even have him as a top 6 SEC quarterback. He's like right in the middle of the pack. I'm projecting a little bit. I have faith to a certain degree in the talent that Georgia has at all positions. I do love Nate Frazier and Josh McCray at running back. I think their offensive line can somewhat reload. Most importantly, Noah Thomas, Colby Young, Dylan Bell, and Zachariah Branch is going to be their deepest wide receiver room in quite some time, potentially Smart's deepest ever at Georgia. Then you factor in Lawson Lucky, Oscar Delp, and then on defense, I love Christian Miller, Xavier McLeod, Gabe Harris, Elo Madozi on the D-line. C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, and Chris Cole, I think, make up one of the best, if not the best, linebacker duo in college football. Their secondary has some questions too, but I think Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann on defense, and then Peyton Woodring at kicker and Brett Thorson at punter, and think about Zachariah Branch as a returner, gives them a special teams edge over almost any team they'll play all year. I have them with 23 All-SEC players, so more players inside my top 4 teams than anyone else has on their top 6 teams. And then in the top 6 teams, I have Georgia with 29 players. So 6 honorable mentions. I think they're deeper than anyone below them by a decent chunk. However, they're not as deep as Texas. Now, saying they won't beat Texas because Georgia was the vastly inferior team in my mind in terms of potential, especially to Texas last year, and they beat them twice. In fact, they kicked their rear to keep it PG, and you could go a step further. They kicked their rear last year twice, especially the first time, but they also did the second time. Texas is number 1, actually not mostly because of Arch Manning. They're number 1 in my book because of how they've recruited and developed on the O-line, the fact that they still have recruited freaks at wide receiver, They brought in a transfer in Jack Endries at tight end to replace Gunnar Helm. They have C.J. Baxter back from injury and returned Quintravion Wisner, so they should be better at running the football. Better mobility at QB, healthier running back room, and I think the same skill position talent approximately as last year. On top of that, I love their D-tackle room, what they did in the portal. I love their DNs. I think Colin Simmons might be the best defensive end in America. I have him as the number one D-end in the SEC. I have Anthony Hill as the number one linebacker in the SEC, and Michael Taff as the best safety in the SEC. They also upgraded special teams by bringing in punter Jack Bouwmeester and kicker Mason Shipley. 24 All-SEC players in my top 4 SEC teams, and 31 All-SEC players once you factor in the 5th and 6th teams as honorable mentions. I have Texas with the best staff in the SEC as well, Georgia barely coming in at second. So number 1 staff and number 1 roster versus number 2 staff and number 2 roster is why Texas is ahead of Georgia. Georgia does have the head coach advantage, though. I think Smart's a much better head coach than almost said Kirby Smart. He might be a better head coach than Kirby Smart of a year or two ago. I think last year was Smart's best coaching job, but he's certainly better than Steve Sarkisian. So thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the notification bell, subscribe, and check back in a few weeks when I'll redo these rankings. I'm going to try and do this probably every month or at least every other month for the remainder of the preseason, because more content's better. I know you all love it. And we'll see you all very soon. And just because Texas is number 1, as you see on my screen, does not mean I'm picking them to win the SEC. You'll figure out soon enough, in hopefully a week or 2, when I have my SEC predictions official.